Hello, and welcome to Shatter Our Souls. Today we are tackling I suppose, round two of the MacGuffin hunt, the Sky Temple Keys. Now, last time we got the first two of them and did a little bit of a cleanup run of Agon Wastes. Today, we are heading in to Torvus Bog, and maybe Sanctuary Fortress, depending on how time goes. And we're going to try to get that all sorted out, the last of our key pieces, so that we can hopefully challenge the boss fairly quick here. Now, something that I hadn't noticed that I had neglected for a while was that I've been neglecting talking about speedrun. It's partially because Metroid Prime 2 I had assumed would be a hard game to speedrun. And I think I'm accurate in that assumption. Metroid Prime 2 is longer, darker, harder than anything that came before it. So you can imagine my surprise when I went looking through speedrunning.com just to get an idea of what I was digging into, and I came across a lot of speedrun, I suppose a lot of speedruns in general that absolutely blew me away as far as their speed. Um, with some players like Mr. Miguel being able to beat the game in 46 minutes of in-game time. And that to me is absolutely absurd. And truth be told, I admit I haven't actually seen said run. But the amount of care that would have gone into that, out of bounds tricks, glitches, and I have no idea what else could possibly go into it to make this possible. But 46 minutes, or just over an hour with cutscenes, is absolutely absurd. And it is something that I am going to have to dig into and watch a few videos of to hopefully understand. My guesstimation is that it is much the same as Prime 1's, where items like the speed boost and lock-on glitches are used very heavily to be able to circumvent certain problems throughout the game. But this is only assumption, it is not me saying that's fact. What I can, however, say is fact is that the Luminoth of this world had documented a lot of information. Now, a few episodes ago, I talked at length about the Luminoth lore, specifically their golden age, and how Agon Wastes used to be a verdant green paradise, how Torvus Bog was once a lush green rainforest, and the state it's in was, or is, far from what it was. I feel like it's time for me to elaborate on that. So, the second phase, or the downfall phase, the Dark Age as they call it, was brought about as a result of the issues that plagued Aether after the fall of the meteor. The meteor was said to have left the skies blazing a bright red for days on end. Their verdant green paradise that was once Agon Wastes became a dead and decrepit world, burnt by the it was burnt in general by the cataclysm that came about. The sea lapped up and took over much of Torvus rainforest and turned it into what we now know as Torvus Bog. And for a time, the Luminoth felt as though this was the worst that would happen. They had survived the worst of it. And then species started mutating very rapidly into dark creatures, angry, and in general, much stronger and much more lethal than anything that they had seen prior. This was the result of the Ing, a new species that had shown up. Along with the meteor itself not ever making impact, this new species having shown up and only being able to live in, well, the dark world, which they had yet to discover, only being able to survive in the world of light via taking over another creature through symbiotic possession. The Darklings, the Ing in general, were a deadly force. And the Luminoth, upon realizing what it is that the Ing were actually capable of, were actually doing, fought to try to find out an origin point. What's going on? Why did they get there? Why were they around? Were all questions that kind of cropped up in a somewhat regular interval. And they didn't really have any answers at first. Rifts between in space-time started to appear, allowing for traversal between light and dark aether. That's about it. There was no greater statement, no greater means of accessing this information. And so, through use of these rifts, they began passing back and forth to dark and light aether, trying to combat the Ing. In the center of the Ing strongholds was a new land, a land that they simply called the Sky Temple. The Sky Temple housed the meanest, the angriest, the strongest of the Ing, the Emperor. Through Metroid Prime 3, we can gather that the Emperor Ing was likely the Seed Guardian, a creature that was meant primarily to protect the Leviathan seed of the planet Phase. And so we get a little bit more information on that to a degree. The Luminoth, through this whole ordeal, began noticing that light aether and dark aether had shared the energy, the light of aether, amongst themselves. Light aether had half, dark aether had half. These two halves started with just the pair of them fighting each other. However, the Luminoth sought to find a more permanent solution for the problem of the Ing's aggression. What they devised was a new device. This was the energy transfer module, believed to be able, or with the ability to pull the energy, the light of aether, from the energy control units, and simultaneously give that same energy back. This dimensional energy would allow aether in general, light aether, the Luminoth, to be able to take the energy of aether back from their rivals, the Ing, and restore their home to its verdant paradise. This was their goal. However, their goal failed miserably. And their attempt at getting the dimensional energy, just one section of it, failed. Their crew that they sent in never returned. However, shortly after this, within the span of a couple of weeks, the energy of Agon disappeared, leading to the belief that it was taken by the Ing and brought to dark aether. This already scorched and burned land was now reduced to thunderstorms, lightning, the constant, well, how do I want to put this? Constant storms, but not a drop of rain. This, of course, was was the result of not having any dimensional energy in Agon. The wastes became even more perilous. And so, the Luminoth turned their attention elsewhere, sent more of their people back to the sanctuary, to the great temple, anything to protect their people. And within another 48 hours, the energy from Torvus had fallen. And then, shortly after that, so too did the energy of the sanctuary fortress. The Luminoth were unable to properly combat the Ing, partially because the energy transfer module was all that was preventing them from possession. And so they ended up in this circumstance where they had to fight to get the energy transfer module back, but they couldn't fight back without risking falling to the hands of the Ing altogether. And so this became a very one-sided battle, with the Ing and Luminoth trying to gain supremacy over one another. The Luminoth succeeding far more often than the Ing, far less often than the Ing. And so they had eventually holed themselves up in the Great Temple. The Luminoth, believing that their days were numbered, sought only respite, refuge. That was all they had left. Umos, or Umos, depending on how you pronounce it, opted to put his people into stasis, believing that should his people survive, should there be a chance of his people surviving, that they'll fight back that day. He would act as the final guardian, the only remaining energy guardian in all of Aether. And should he fail in his task of saving his people, they'd be none the wiser. Now this side of Umos I personally like, but dislike. I like the idea that he was trying to spare his people this harsh reality, this hard fate, so to speak. But I dislike his approach. I believe that his people had every right to understand what was going on around them, to know that they would wake up the next day. And that is probably my biggest gripe with Umos as a general statement, is just how he approached this specific problem. It was at around this point that Samus first arrived on Aether. And the events of the opening of the game saw the saw Samus's first battle against the Ing in the Great Temple, the Alpha Splinter battle. And this kicked off the final stage of the war between the Luminoth and the Ing, or rather, Samus, a third party, somebody who up to this point had no stake in the battle whatsoever. Samus, of course, we know what happens from there. She takes herself and joins in the battle to the best of her ability, and seeks to find a solution that will bring the Luminoth, a close friend of her, of the ones that raised her, the Chozo, back to the world of light, out of stasis, with a new thriving planet around them. And to a degree, I believe this happens quite well. Samus goes from Agon to Torvus to the Sanctuary Fortress, each location getting more energy back from Dark Aether, and finding a way to truly build this planet back up from the decay it was in. But also fights back against many of the Guardians, many of the strongest entities that Dark Aether had at its disposal. And I believe that this truly showcases some of Samus's strength as a character. Throughout much of her adventures, if you look at Metroid Zero mission, she is a contracted warrior for this task. If you look at Metroid Prime, it is a distress signal that brings her there. But she's not under a contract to defeat anybody. She is not under a contract when she heads to Talon 4. She was under a contract to reach Aether, to find out what happened to the Galactic Federation troopers that landed shortly before her. But what transpires throughout this game, in its entirety, Samus was not contractually obligated to do. She did what she did out of a desire to be of help, to be a guardian to those around her, the Galactic Warrior. If you look at Prime 3, yes, she was contracted to do the task or to complete a task initially, to find out what was going on and to help with the supercomputers getting a nasty virus. That was her goal. The goal and mission itself changed dramatically over time, but the goal changing over time was a result of just how things work in that world. And I can excuse that to a degree. So, we're now done collecting the last of the torvus keys. So, I think it's time to head to Sanctuary. The torvus keys I don't really enjoy too much. Well, the Aether keys I found were fine. The torvus keys, just one being in a puddle right at the beginning of the area and one being in a boss room you have visited prior, bugged me. And if it weren't for the fact that you needed the light suit to get both of them, theoretically I could have started this mission a long time ago. Anywho, enough rambling and raving about that. I'm not interested. I don't believe that that needs to be a hill we lie on today. What I do want to get back into is Samus's various missions. Prime 3 was not a contract. Prime Hunters was. Prime 3 was a contract. Hunters was. And I see this a lot throughout the adventures or misadventures of Samus, where about 50% of her missions are ones she goes on not for financial gain, not for personal wealth, fame, or anything of that sort. It all ties back to who Samus is as a character and how she was raised. What morals and challenges that she, as a character, wished to overcome. And so, I believe it stands to reason that throughout this challenge, throughout this adventure, growing to be a more close-knit part of this community, of the galactic community with the Luminoth, she, of course, is granted extra power through them. This being in the form of the light suit. Now, the light suit, in and of itself, I believe is probably one of the most significant suits that she has ever worn. If you look at some of the other ones, like the gravity suit, that's just technology. That's just the Luminoth being, or not Luminoth, the Chozo being able to access different aspects of the suit and create artificial gravity. This is fine. That segment makes sense. The dark suit was a crude fashioning of the Luminoth tech on top of the Chozo tech. But the final version, the version that she gets for the final battle, is the fusion of not just the Luminoth and Chozo technology, but also houses the third and easily most potent portion. It houses a section of the Light of Aether. the suit itself is much more adaptable at this point. And I don't think it has to be said, but I'm going to anyways. Samus's suit is easily one of the most potent, but it symbolizes not only the trust the Luminoth and Chozo have placed in her, but it also symbolizes the last hope for, in this case, for all of Aether. And so there's a lot more behind the scenes, a lot more scope, a lot more trust in the entirety of this game, in the actions of Samus and her capabilities as a hunter, that truly makes this suit stand on its own merit. Sorry, I'm just trying to figure this out here. Okay. Da, 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 da. Oh, that's the wrong tone. Do, 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 do. There we go. And that gives us a missile. Okay, cool. Anywho, let me inquire. Is there anything that you, as the viewers of this channel, feel about Prime 2's significance to the overall narrative? Do you believe that this is a tipping point or a pinnacle moment for Samus? Or do you think that maybe I am overestimating the significance of the game? Because I'll be honest, Metroid Prime trilogy, in my opinion, each game houses a lot more information about Samus than I believe than many other games do in general. And this comes in a few different forms, be it Samus's refusal to give up, be it how she approaches challenges, be it how the world as a whole reacts to her. There's always more information to get out of these games. And so, okay, so close. Nope. I forgot the code. This is bad. So there's always more information to gain from the world and how the characters all react to one another. And I believe that Samus in each game has more to offer than what she ever actually accomplishes. To me, part of it is that Samus is a beacon of hope. A being that without her action, without her aptitude, and her character development, her arc as an individual, many of the situations within the galaxy that she comes across would be insurmountable. And to look at this, look at the original Metroid. Look at Metroid Zero Mission. Now, Zero Mission, Samus was contracted to do one job, which was to find and either collect or destroy the Metroids that had been taken from a cargo ship to the space pirates' homeworld of Zebes. And overall, that's all it was. That's all it was ever meant to be. But we know how video games tend to go. There's usually more behind it than meets the eye. I gotta go back out to the light world. And so, Samus, of course, goes to this mission. But she goes because other people failed. not because she herself needed to do it. And so the other individuals that failed this mission, technically, for all intents and purposes, the Galactic Federation, if they threw enough people at this, would have been able to do it. But the number of casualties that the Galactic Federation would have suffered would have been too high. They needed an expert, a specialist on planet Zebes. And so they sent in Samus, this somewhat unassuming individual that once worked with the Federation, but also was raised by the Chozo on Zebes. If you look at Metroid 2, it was believed that the Metroids were too dangerous to exist. And so, what happened? They tracked down the homeworld of the Metroids, the planet SR-388, with one goal: track down and destroy all of the Metroids. Make it so that the Metroids are functionally extinct. They are too dangerous to be left alive. This was the rule. This was the goal. And that goal was serviceable enough. But then we take a look just a little bit further, and we reach Super Metroid. Samus, of course, in her goodwill, in her good nature, opted to spare one Metroid, a baby that had hatched in front of her after the Metroid Queen had fallen. And she took it to the Galactic Federation for study, believing that there was something in the Metroids that could, in one way or another, help them understand the universe, or even better than that, maybe be used in medicine, or help the galaxy, rather than be seen as a hindrance, believing in the better nature of all things. However, Ridley had other plans, and he kidnapped the baby Metroid. We know this. Whee! He kidnapped the baby Metroid and began experimenting and trying his best to make sure that the baby Metroid would be, how do I put this? It would be serving him and multiply the baby Metroid to be able to create the weapon that he so sought. Now, this was a plan by Mother Brain. We can assume, based on our understanding of later games, that Mother Brain had ulterior motives. It wasn't about providing the space pirates with these bioweapons. It was about trying to restore galactic balance. Without the Metroids, the X-Parasite would break loose. And that is exactly what happens in Metroid Fusion. So, already, you have this nigh unstoppable character in the form of Samus. But despite Samus being nigh unstoppable, she lacks information at times. Information that, if she had the full story from the get-go, she wouldn't have made certain decisions that she did. She wouldn't have defeated the Metroid Queen. Not intentionally, at least. It would have been left as it is. Their homeworld would have been left as a sanctuary rather than being used as a breeding ground, or rather than creating the circumstances that they were left in. And so Samus as a character always stands with, she is only capable of making the decisions that she has information around. And we can sort of see this in Metroid Fusion. How Samus works alongside the Federation. They go check out planet SR-388, life goes well, and she gets infected by the X. And she thinks nothing of it, actually going as far as to get back in her ship and travel back to Federation airspace, believing her mission to be complete, only to pass out, gravely injured, and fly into an asteroid field. This destroyed her ship. This caused her excruciating pain. And she, by the time the Federation got to her, had to have the suit surgically removed because there was no saving the suit, only saving the person wearing it. And she was able to receive a vaccine. A vaccine made from the same DNA that was in the baby Metroid. And here we come full circle. Samus is at this point the last Metroid. The only individual left that has any tie to the Metroid at all. And so, ironically, she becomes the very thing that she at one point sought to destroy. And it's a very interesting full circle moment. Admittedly, tying very, very close roots back to the Alien franchise, with Ripley being saved by a vaccine made from the alien DNA. But these are, honestly, it makes for a good story. And while the pair would probably be, well, I'm pretty sure Alien came before Metroid, I would assume it would make a fair statement that Nintendo probably wouldn't get away with that in this day and age. I also believe that Samus as a character stands for more than just a weapon. She stands for hope. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments below. While you're there, drop a like and maybe a subscribe. Until next time, I hope you all have a good one.